Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are looking at one of the most intense, genuinely gripping stories of human perseverance ever recorded. It is a dramatic, unbelievable tale of survival that pushes the very boundaries of what it actually means to stay alive. We're going back in time to examine an event that started out with this soaring, beautiful optimism, yet ended in an unimaginable test of the human spirit. Think back to 1846. The California dream was this bright vision of boundless hope, fertile land, and the promise of a totally new life. Yet the stark reality that rescue parties would eventually uncover was a Sierra nightmare, literally filled with freezing despair and charred bones. So you have to ask yourself, how does a journey defined by the optimistic pursuit of the American dream turn into such an ice-cold, horrifying reality? Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1, Chasing the American Dream. To truly grasp the gravity of this disaster, we really have to understand where these pioneers started. 87. That's the number. And these weren't seasoned, rugged explorers. These were 87 hopeful men, women, and completely innocent children. They packed up their entire lives into wagons, genuinely believing they were heading toward prosperity and a better life. But instead, with every single mile, they were heading straight into a waking nightmare. Which brings us to part 2. The fatal shortcut. You know, every historical tragedy seems to have that one critical turning point where the initial hope begins to fracture. For our pioneers, it was the compounding errors of a route called the Hastings Cutoff. It was promised to save them weeks, but instead it led them directly into unforgiving, rugged mountains and scorching deserts. This single decision burned absolutely precious time, killed their oxen, and completely exhausted their food supplies. So by the time they finally arrived at the Sierra Nevada mountains, they were weeks behind schedule. Part 3. Trapped in the Ice Hill. That tragic delay brought them face to face with a chilling reality right as they reached the mountain pass. 20 feet. I want you to try and visualize that scale for a second. The worst winter in recorded history struck, and massive snowstorms buried their trails under 20 feet of snow in a matter of hours. This made forward progress completely impossible. And retreating? Well, that was a guaranteed death sentence. They were completely, hopelessly trapped. What followed was an agonizing, rapid loss of resources. Temperatures plummeted to deadly lows. People literally began to freeze to death in their sleep. With absolutely no animals left to hunt in this frozen wasteland, the survivors were forced into such absolute desperation that they began boiling their own leather hides just to make a thin soup. It was an unimaginable, primal hunger that inevitably began to warp their minds. Part 4, The Unthinkable Choice. We are about to descend into the darkest chapter of this tragedy. So what actually happens when the line between civilization and savagery completely vanishes? Because when that last boiled scrap of leather was gone and the hunger became absolute, the unthinkable finally happened. To survive the winter, the group turned to the bodies of those who had already perished. In the dead silence of the snowy woods, friends were forced to consume friends. Some families even had to consume members of their own families just to stay alive. We must look at this with deep empathy and sorrow. This wasn't some sensational act of malice. It was the ultimate, inescapable trap of the ice hell they were buried in. And this brilliantly illustrates that history remembers this not as an act of cruelty, but as a total, tragic collapse of the human spirit driven by absolute, sheer desperation. It was exactly what one survivor recalled as, quote, a desperate, tearful struggle for the next breath of life. Part 5. The Ghostly Rescue. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the brutal reality of the numbers. Months later, when relief parties finally breached those massive snow walls, the scene they discovered was utterly chilling. Out of the 87 hopeful souls who started this journey, only 48 survived. 39 perished. It is a profound gut punch. The rescue parties didn't find healthy pioneers celebrating their survival. They found a horrific scene of scattered remains and deeply traumatized people who looked more like walking ghosts than human beings. They carried out a secret that would haunt America forever. In the face of absolute death, humanity can sometimes be the first thing to die. This is the lasting legacy of the Donner Party. It teaches us a haunting, incredibly complex lesson about the absolute extremes of human perseverance and what happens when the human body and mind are pushed way past the breaking point. I want to leave you with a question to really reflect upon. In the face of absolute death, What would you do for your next breath of life? It's a very heavy thought for sure, but it is absolutely central to understanding this historic tragedy. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this gave you a profound new understanding of the immense physical and psychological costs of survival.